and welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. My name is Chris, and tonight I will be your guide as we travel back in time and soothe our soul with the mythological story of Parvati and the god Shiva. Before we begin, however, let us take a moment to relax and find comfort in the space that we are in, here and now. Close your eyes and allow yourself to find a comfortable position on your mattress. Keeping your eyes softly closed, take a deep breath in, relishing the feeling of the sweet air nourishing both your body and your mind. As you exhale, embrace the feeling of your muscles relaxing as you sink deeper and deeper and deeper still into the comfortable bed beneath you. Know that any time your mind wanders or unwelcome thoughts find their way into your internal monologue, you can turn your attention back to your breath and the comfort that can be found within it. Picture your bed on a tall mountain peak. You are safely perched up there, completely comfortable and at ease. All around you, you can see the world as it moves with the rhythm of nature and the changes of the day. In the early morning, the mist clings around you, blanketing the forests and rivers and valleys beneath with their beautiful haze. As the sun peaks over the horizon, feel the warmth of those first rays of light kissing your skin. On this mountain peak, you are the first to feel the touch of that sunlight, the embrace of this beautiful, warm morning. From the soft haven that is your bed, you watch as the landscape around you progresses in a time lapse. The egg yolk sun makes its way across the sky in a gracefully high arc, casting dancing shadows across the landscape as the day progresses. And as the sun slips down over the horizon, saying farewell to this beautiful day, it sends swathes of pink, purple, and red across the sky, as its promise that there is more wonder and beauty to be found the next day. As you breathe in, imagine that sun gliding over the landscape in that brilliant arc. And as you breathe out, imagine the stars and moon drifting overhead. Breathe in, feeling that warmth on your skin. Watch the sunlight paint the world around you. And breathe out as the moonlight kisses your skin and the calm energy of night soothes your soul in a way you didn't even know you needed. There is peace in the rhythm of the world, and there is peace in stories about those who craft the rhythm of the world, of people like Shiva. Now that we have found the comfort in the space that we are in here and now, it is time to begin our story. Shiva, the great god, is one of the principal deities of Hinduism. He is the primal Atman, the soul or the self of the universe. And, as such, he is a god of good and bad, life and death, a god of balance. And even with his power, even with his control over the universe, there was one thing that the god could not control nor deny in the world, and that is love. Sati was a woman of great intelligence and beauty. Born to Daksha, one of the agents of creation, she lived a life of luxury and peace. She was said by many to be Daksha's favorite daughter, and it showed. From a young age, Sati was loyal and dedicated to Shiva. She adored the tales of him, begging her father and mother to tell them to her every night before she fell asleep. As she grew into womanhood, she dedicated her life to Shiva. Though she had all the finest things in life, and though she could marry anyone she wanted, she stepped away from her life of luxury. Instead, she traveled deep into the forests, devoting herself to a hermetic life where she worshipped Shiva. She lived under the stars and survived off of the land, praying to Shiva day and night. Shiva, who lived atop Mount Kailash, saw her acts of devotion. As a god, he could pick any woman to be his bride. He could pick the most beautiful woman, the wealthiest woman, the woman with the most powerful family. But he couldn't take his eyes off of Sati. Some days, all he would do was watch her. Usually in the morning, she would rise from the shelter she had made herself. As she stepped out into the sunshine, she would close her eyes, relishing the feeling of the warm sun on her skin. Bleary-eyed, she would meander through the forest, listening to the birds sing their morning song to the world. Sometimes, she'd trail her fingers behind her, letting them run over the emerald leaves and colourful flowers blooming all through the forest. When she got to the nearby stream, she would lower her feet into the water and lean back. Her shoulders would relax as she sunk into the moment, appreciating the simple peace. This was what caught Shiva's attention. It wasn't just her devotion to him, her rejection of her wealthy, privileged life that interested him. It was her appreciation of the world. She walked through the world every day like she was living in a dream. She would pause and bend down to look at the smallest insect and wander through the countryside for hours just to lie in the softest patch of grass in the wildflower meadow. It was an otherwise ordinary day when Shiva appeared to Sati. She was sitting by the riverside, deep in prayer to him. when she felt a rush of air beside her. When she opened her eyes, she felt utterly breathless, and Shiva felt exactly the same. The minute their gazes intertwined, the rest of the world faded away. They couldn't hear the bubbling creek, the chirping birds flying overhead, the sound of the grass and leaves rustling in the fragrant breeze. They somehow felt both frozen in time and completely untouched by it. Shiva has lived a long time. Living as a god, he has experienced and seen many things. But he had never felt anything nearly as powerful, nor as vital as this. Breathlessly, Shiva reached for Sati. Their souls intertwined by the electric connection running between them. When his hand wrapped around hers, a warmth ran through both of them that seemed to awaken something inside of them that neither of them knew existed. Shiva has always been powerful, and Sati has always been free. But with their fingers intertwined, they were grounded. They were whole. A piece of them had somehow been missing this whole time, and neither of them had been aware of it. From that moment on, Shiva and Sati were inseparable. That very day, they were wed in a small ceremony, though Shiva was eager to show Sati their home up on the top of the mountain. Sati was eager to show Shiva the wilderness that had become her home. She led him by the hand to her favorite places in the forest. First, they settled in a meadow by the bubbling creek, where they had first encountered one another. They walked for quite some time, mostly in silence, letting the sounds of the forest explain their feelings for them. Sati lay down in the grass first, giggling as she lazily stretched amongst the flowers. Shiva settled down beside her, a bit awkward at first. It was only then that he realized he had never lain in the grass before. They curled up next to one another, breathing in the sweet aroma of the plants and the flowers, as they lay there in utter peace and comfort. On occasion, Shiva would reach out and squeeze Sati's hand, but for the most part, he was so transfixed by her that he felt he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He watched her eyes light up every time a bird flitted across the sky. He watched as delight and wonder glistened in her gaze, like the embers of a fire when the breeze blew a little stronger, or when an animal could be heard rustling through the forest in the distance. She was in touch with the environment around her in an entirely otherworldly way. At one point, Sati turned and caught Shiva staring. She laughed her bright, effervescent laugh, telling Shiva that she was the one who should be looking at him that way. But Shiva could only shake his head and smile at Sati in response. He might have been the god of balance, of good and evil, but Sati was the one who seemed to have understood the world more than he ever could. Then they went and dipped their feet in the river. They were both hot from the feeling of the bright sun on their skin, from the humidity of this sprawling rainforest. The cool water washing over their feet caused them both to sigh and sit back in relief. They spent most of the afternoon there, watching birds dart down into the water to catch insects, leaving ripples in their wake. Below their feet, in the crystal clear water, fish glided by, creating a unique mosaic with their colourful scales as they drifted on down the winding river. It was here that Sati took a chance to gaze at Shiva, the love of her life. Though he was also a god of destruction, of endings and beginnings, there was a constant gentleness to him. He didn't give off the aura of a god. There was nothing intimidating, nothing powerful about his presence, aside from the fact that Sati felt entirely intertwined with him. Though he didn't know it, he too looked at the world with a sense of wonder. Sati watched as he dipped his fingers into the water below, smiling sweetly to himself at the cool touch and the motion of the fish below. He had the spirit she always knew he would have, and it made her more drawn to him than she ever imagined she could be. Then, it was time to travel to their home. Shiva took Sati by the hand and gave her a reassuring smile, telling her that they were about to travel to the place they would spend the rest of their lives together. In the blink of an eye, they were there, high atop Mount Kailash. The cool mountain wind caused Sati to gasp, refreshing her and revitalizing her almost instantly. From up here, she could see the landscape in an entirely new light. She saw farmland stretching for miles and miles. She could see the very river that they had been in mere seconds earlier, lace through the vast countryside, twisting and turning through dozens of different environments. Up here, she too felt like a god. Shiva placed a hand on her back, leading her away from the vista and into their home. His palace that has been his residence for many, many years. Within seconds of crossing the threshold, Sati felt like she had arrived at the place she was always meant to be in. And so, their lives went on in utter bliss every day. Shiva and Sati would awaken wrapped in one another's arms. There was rarely a moment when they didn't have smiles on their faces. They would eat breakfast together and meditate in the garden for most of the morning. Then, Sati would take Shiva's hand and lead him down the mountain to the meadows and forests just a bit below. There, they'd lie in the grass, talk about life, and watch the animals make their way through the forest. For the first time in his entire existence, Shiva was truly, deeply, madly happy. But, unfortunately, even for gods, things don't always go smoothly. Sati's father was displeased with her marriage to Shiva, and thus some problems began to arise. And soon after their marriage, Sati gave her life to prove her eternal love for Shiva. The god of destruction lived up to his name after the death of his beloved wife. From that point forward, nothing was ever the same. Devastated by his loss, Shiva climbed atop the mountain and sat in meditation. But this was no ordinary meditation. Not like the meditation that he enjoyed with Sati, and nothing like the meditation before she came into his life. This was a meditation of grief, a meditation that lasted for thousands of years. Shiva sat atop that mountain, enduring the cold, the snow, the wind, the rain, the hot sun of summer, completely unmoving. The sun rose and set over him endlessly, and the stars in the sky sparkled overhead. In these years of meditation over the loss of his beloved, Shiva abandoned his duties. One day, Brahma, the god of creation, looked down upon the earth and saw that things have changed rather drastically. Nature had lost its luster, and the world and its creatures had fallen stagnant. Brahma could not create and give life to things without Shiva destroying and changing things. The world was stuck in time. Nothing new could be born in this state. But deep within the Himalayas, a child was born, a child that would change the world and bring peace and balance back to the lands. Her name was Parvati, and she was the reincarnation of Sati, sent to awaken her beloved from his deep meditation. When Parvati grew up to adulthood, her deep desire to serve Shiva washed over her yet again, just as it had when she was living as Sati. Though her parents worried deeply about her and didn't approve of the journey she was about to embark on, she pressed on anyway, heading to the cold, icy Mount Kailash to care for Shiva and wait for him to re-emerge into the world. She wanted to be by his side when he opened his eyes for the first time in 1,000 years. But The journey was no easy task. Mount Kailash was the tallest mountain on the horizon. Even from a distance, it was a force to be reckoned with. It rose into the sky with a stark, white, snowy peak that seemed to sprout from the earth with a purely magical purpose. But Parvati was prepared. She was devoted to Shiva, just as Sati had been. She began her journey by walking along the edge of the very river where Sati and Shiva had met for the first time, thousands and thousands of years ago. She felt a twinge in her heart as she walked along the banks of the river, a twinge that she couldn't quite place. She stopped for just a moment to dip her feet in the water and trail her fingers along the surface. She watched fish swim below on the clear, rocky bottom of the river, making their way upstream to whatever treasures it held. She watched as birds dove down and dragged their claws and beaks through the water, leaving ripples and circles in their wake. She felt peace, and though she knew the journey ahead of her was a challenging one, she was strengthened by this moment, feeling as though she had experienced it before. She continued on up the mountain, passing through many beautiful environments along the way. She slept under trees, watching the stars pass overhead, and every time she stopped, she felt a tugging at her heart that grew stronger and stronger. She could feel the divine presence of Shiva meditating as she grew closer and closer and closer to him. Nearly every night, she would start a crackling fire to keep herself warm. For hours, she would stare at the flames as they ate at the citrusy wood, kicking glowing embers into the dark night air. It was a dance of nature that soothed her soul, a dance of nature that reminded her of why she was on this journey. Often, she found herself dreaming of the day that she would be sitting by the fire with Shiva, telling stories and gazing into one another's eyes. She had never felt the inexplicable connection to another person, the way she already felt connected to Shiva. To her, he felt like a piece of her being that was missing. There was a constant hole in her chest that ached in his absence. She knew that the moment he opened his eyes, that hole would be filled. She would be complete, and so would he. But for now, she turned to those crackling fires and starry nights to make her journey more bearable. Along the way, she encountered a young shepherd who joined her for a meal. They sat by the fire and talked to one another, learning about the other's life. The shepherd had been born in these mountains and intended to live in them his whole life. He was seldom lonely up here, caring for his flock. Instead, he was comforted by the beauty of nature around him. He told Parvati that he had the birds, the fish, and other animals to keep him company. Parvati could relate to his appreciation of nature, though she knew it couldn't fill the void she felt inside her. The shepherd was surprised by her devotion, but didn't quite understand it. How could she devote herself to a man she had never met? To a god that may not have even known she existed? But Parvati simply smiled at the man, secure in her goal, confident in what she was meant to do in this life. And the next day, her goal came within her reach. As the sun rose over the snowy peak of Mount Kailash, Parvati saw her love for the very first time. He was silhouetted by the rising sun, which made the sky a breathtaking watercolor of pinks, purples, reds, and oranges. He was unmoving, even as the cold mountain wind blew all around him. Parvati approached him slowly, her heart thrumming in her chest. She gazed upon his face, and a glimmer of recognition ran through her body. One that made her gasp with surprise and delight. He was the most handsome person she had ever seen. His long hair flowed around him, blowing in his face in the wind. She reached forward, softly and gently, tucking his hair behind his ear in a simple act of kindness. The minute her hand brushed the back of his ear, waves of emotion crashed through her body. Happy tears rolled down her cheeks as that hole in her chest seemed to begin to fill, little by little. She felt grounded. She knew instantly that she had made the right choice by coming here. But she also knew that she would need help to truly awaken her love. Atop the mountain, she reached out to the god of love, Karma, asking for his help. She begged him to shoot an arrow of love into Shiva's heart to awaken him. Karma agreed without hesitation. He shot the arrow into Shiva's heart, while Parvati waited in anticipation. For the first time in many years, Shiva felt something. The passion that washed over him was powerful, so powerful that it caused him to stir. He opened his eyes, but instead of looking at Parvati with love, he looked at Karma with rage. He cast the arrow back at Karma, angry that Karma would awaken him into a world without Sati, angry that Karma would ruin his deep meditation. As quickly as he had awakened, Shiva fell back into his meditation, leaving Parvati dumbfounded. She knelt before him, trying to keep the tears from rolling down her cheeks. Clearly, magic wasn't the right way to bring Shiva back into this world, since not even the god of love could stir him awake. But she thought perhaps there was another way to bring Shiva back to this world. Perhaps it was by doing what she had been doing all along, by caring and devoting her life to Shiva. And so, that is exactly what she did. For the majority of the day, she prayed by his side. She closed her eyes and sat on the ground, entering a deep meditation for hours on end. It was the most powerful, enlightening meditation she had ever experienced, and it only grew stronger with each day. The other gods watched this display with hope in their hearts. They could sense a difference in Shiva's energy the moment Parvati began to pray, and they had no doubt that she would be the one to awaken him, to bring him back to this world and to his duties. But days passed, and Shiva remained in his meditative state. When Parvati wasn't meditating alongside Shiva, she devoted the rest of her time to caring for him. Most mornings, she would travel down the mountain to forage. She would search for hours to find the freshest fruit, nuts, and vegetables to bring back up to Shiva. She would place them in a small basket to put on her back, whispering a prayer into each and every one. It was an arduous task, but one that brought her great joy. In each vegetable and fruit, she saw power and energy that she was giving to Shiva. She saw an encouragement for him to awaken, to return to the world and to her. Then, with the fruits in tow, she would meander to a meadow filled with wildflowers. She would pick as many flowers as she could, then sit down in the grass and braid them into a necklace for Shiva, a necklace to show her appreciation, to remind him of the beauty that can be found in the world. With the flowers around her own neck, she would go to the river's edge and wash off the fruits and vegetables, humming and smiling to herself as she did so. It was no easy task. The meditation and the foraging, but they filled her with joy and purpose. Each day that passed was one day closer to truly being with Shiva. Then she'd begin the long, winding journey back up the mountain. She would kneel before Shiva, placing the fruits and vegetables before him. Then she would place the necklace around his neck to comfort him. Some days she would brush the hair from his face. Every single time she tucked a hair behind his ear, she felt that spark ripple through her body. The spark that was impossible to ignore. She knew that her love was in there somewhere, preparing himself to come out. Months passed, and then years. Parvati's meditation went from lasting mere hours to days, to months, and then to years. She no longer collected flowers or fruits and vegetables. Instead, she devoted all her time to meditation alongside Shiva. Through the cold, snowy wind of the mountains, she did not flinch. In the heat of summer, she remained steadfast. The light and energy within her, known as tapas, grew more and more and more. Through her meditation, she became powerful. So powerful, in fact, that Shiva, beside her, began to feel the warmth of her soul. It was then, after thousands and thousands of years, that Shiva opened his eyes. He was greeted by the sight of Parvati meditating in front of him, sitting on the ground with a smile on her face. Behind her, the sun was setting. The sky was bright with blues, pinks, purples, and oranges, each hue more breathtaking than the last. But it was Parvati that Shiva was mesmerized by. He extended a hand, gently cupping his fingers around her face. She reached up, clasping his hand in her own. When she opened her eyes to look at him, that void inside her was filled, and at the same time, so was Shiva's grief. He recognized her energy and devotion almost immediately. He could not believe that after all these years, Sati had returned to him. Parvati and Shiva were married that very same day. Both powerful beings in their own right, they still completed one another. From that point forward, Shiva returned to his duties, and the two lived on the mountain in serenity and peace. They spent most of their days discussing philosophy, the world, and their love for one another. I hope you have enjoyed this story, and it has brought you a night of peaceful, restful sleep. Please join me again tomorrow for another sleep story. Until then, sweet dreams.